Hey guys, how you doing? This is Dorian from Eternal Games with another video, and in this one I'm gonna show you the easiest and fastest way to rig your characters and get ready for animations. And in the next video, the one after this, I'm gonna teach you how to use already existing animations or retargeting in layman's terms. And I'm gonna show you how to use Mixamo animations on the character Gabriel. So let's get started. First of all, the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to combine the whole character, but not yet, but not now. And let's just let's give it a kind of a one of the textures. Let's apply one of the textures so it wouldn't look like crap, because it kind of looks like crap. Let's give it a Lambert. Okay, I'm gonna name it Gabriel because that's what his name is. Okay, and for the color map, I'm gonna give it the file of the albedo map or the base color map, whatever you want to call it. Here, which is this. And you can press 6 or turn this on to see the textures, so it would be nicer to look at. Okay, and the first step for our rigging is going to be to position the character in a T pose. This is called an A pose because of the shape of the arms, and this is not exactly ideal for rigging. The best thing to do is to get your character in T pose. You can't model it in T pose because it looks like crap, but you can turn it into a T pose before you start rigging. And to see the perfect shape for the rigging, let me get to the rigging part here. Go to skeleton and click on humanik. Okay, let's create a skeleton. It's too big. Let's scale it down to about the size Gabriel is. If you turn this on, it's called X-ray joints, so you can see the joints through the mesh. We're gonna scale it, and I'm gonna try to kind of align the hip joint here. Of course, here I'm gonna call it main joint, but we're gonna get into that in a second. Let me get it to somewhere like that. Okay. And if you go to definition, if you go into definition, the first thing we're gonna do is that we're gonna kind of move these joints into place. For example, the chest joint here has to control the rib cage of the character, which for Gabriel is kind of the golden part. This is the ribs, and the ribs don't exactly bend because they're consistent of a big bone part, so we're gonna have to align that. I'm going to right view. You can turn on X-ray too, but you don't have to. We're gonna get it to somewhere like this, a little bit down. And if you do anything wrong, and if you kind of ruin the rig here, these blue lights here are gonna turn yellow, which means you have a problem, so you gotta try to avoid that. Now here I'm trying to move this one individual joint instead of the whole joint hierarchy, so press and hold D, then you can move the one single joint that you want to move. D again. We're probably going to run into some problem here, but we didn't. Okay. What you need to keep in mind is that you need to move these joints in a way that doesn't really contradict the positioning of the joints and the movement of the joints in a human body. For example, if you rotate the knee joint like this is wrong. You shouldn't do something like this. And actually it should be showing errors here, but it doesn't for some reason. But it should turn yellow here. And let me get it somewhere like that, because I can move the knee in place, and that's kind of a better thing to do. Kind of trying to find the middle ground here, something like that. And you don't have to move both the legs or both the arms. We're gonna mirror those later on. What the hell is this? Okay, this is the neck joint, which needs to be in the bottom of the neck, where neck meets the torso, the rib cage. So to up somewhere like that. And this is the hip joint. It needs to be on the top of the neck, somewhere here. And this is going to control the movement and the rotations of the head. Okay, and the clavicle. About here. And the arm is like spread here. And this is where, so now I kind of almost know the positioning of my hand and T-pose. This is why we brought the skeleton first. I can kind of see the position of the where the arm is supposed to be, of where it's supposed to look like when it's in T-pose. So let's get it in T-pose. I'm gonna select the whole arm. I'm gonna press Ctrl G, so the whole arm is gonna move from the one single pivot point. I'm gonna place the pivot point in the center of my kind of ball joint, the joint I've made here. Trying to center it. This is fine. Then I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And don't worry if your character is looking like doing something weird. That's fine. T-pose is not something that is for every character. For example, this one, the arm is shaped in a way that kind of looks a little weird when it's bent completely 90 degrees. This is usually not what a game character does. We go to top view. The joint needs to be a little back, further back, around here. Okay, you should try to kind of align the arm and the bones of the arm in a way that these joints, they have to be in the center of the geometry. For example, here on the spine, you'll realize that the human spine is not in the middle of a person's guts. It's actually in the back. It's here. But when you're rigging a character, 3D character, if you put the joints here in the back, you're kind of setting the character up for failure, because if the character is kind of bending over like this, then all of these geometry is gonna be squished together, and it's gonna lose. It's gonna look pretty bad, and these here are gonna be stretched a little too much. Because that's why we kind of try to put all the joints in the center of the geometry. See here, this is an error. This isn't right, because these two have to be aligned. And if I want to get the hip joint in place, I have to move the main joint forward to get it right. Then I'm gonna have to move the first spine over back to get it in place, somewhere like that. And also these guys. And something else that's noteworthy is that when you're trying to place the knee joints or the arms, it's kind of better to have some space. I mean, they shouldn't be in a straight line, because if you don't do something like that, it's gonna help a lot with the design of the rig. Because if you get a pole vector here, it's gonna find the angle of where the knee is supposed to bend, because it's bent a little, so it understands that you want the knee to bend in that direction. And it kind of makes, you don't have to, but it kind of makes the overall pipeline a little faster, somewhere like that. And you should know the ball joint here for the foot needs to be on the floor, not in the middle, because that's how the this part of the model is supposed to bend. If it's here, it's gonna bend and it's gonna look weird. It's gonna have to be on the floor. This is the ankle joint. Okay, let's grab the group again. Go to top view. Hold down D. Push this in. I'm gonna rotate this a bit, something like that. The joint is a bit too far, needs to be in. Now here, let me grab the wrist of the arm. Now these are gonna be another group inside the first group. Center pivot. Freeze. Let's change this to world. Okay, hold down D, place it in the center of this joint. Okay, D again. Okay, center. Let's get back to humanik. Place it in the right spot, which is the middle of the joint. Okay, I think you understand what I mean. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through the placement of the fingers and the leg, and we can take it from there. Alright, now that we're done placing the joints and placing the geometry, let's start mirroring these. Let me look at this guy and this guy and the legs. Okay, actually we should first start the naming and the completing of the mesh. So here technically I have what I need to control the head, but it's better to have one joint on the top of the head, which is gonna help with the orientation of the joints that we're gonna get into. So I'm just gonna click on this guy, Control D to duplicate it. I'm gonna place it on top of the head somewhere like this. And because it's the parent for this guy, you should go and press Shift P and then tab on the second one and then shift click on the first one and press P to parent it to this. So you pick the child first and then shift click the parent and press P. And also I have to have a joint for the eyes, because I want to change the eye to look around. If you have a facial rig, which means if you want your character to talk, open his mouth and do things like that, smile and frown, you need to have a complete facial rig, which is gonna do just that. But I don't need it because mine is a robot and it doesn't speak or things like that. I mean, it speaks, but his face doesn't move. Control D again. I'm gonna move this guy in place. I'm gonna place it exactly in the middle of the eyeball. Control 1 to isolate. You have to place it dead center. Like that. Okay. So that's the right part. Press Control D again, move it slightly forward to the tip of the eye, Shift P, click this, Shift click this, press P, just like that. This is gonna be, maybe we should make these smaller. Over here, let's pick maybe 0.5. Yeah, 1 was better. This also 1. That's it. So in humanik window, you see the big red cross means there's a big problem because we don't have the legs and the arms. Because this character has to be a humanoid, you can't have I don't know, like a big spider or something. You can't have humanik for things like that. It has to be a human being with arms and legs for the animations to work properly. Okay, but there's also one more joint that has to be in the tip of the foot, which is going to do the exact same as the tip of the head. Control D, move it forward, that's fine. Shift P again, P to parent. Orientation has to be a little bit like this. Yeah. Okay, so these are going to be the joints, all the joints that we need for this character. And the next part would be to name all of these properly. And to change the names, we should go to channel box. This is the name of the joint. The way I work in Eternal Games is that we name the joints. For example, this is gonna be the lower neck, and in the end I have to place an underline JNT, which is short for joint, And you don't have to use JNT, but you do have to have some sort of naming convention, because by the end we're gonna have joints, we're gonna have controllers, we're gonna have IK handles. So when we go to hypergraph hierarchy to place these in the right direction, that they're gonna work exactly the way we want them to, you have to have these names for them. You have to have a certain convention for the names. For example, I end the joint names with JNT. I end the controller names with CTRL. I end the IK handles with HD. So you do have to have something like that for it to not to confuse you later on. Okay, let's so let me go ahead and name all these and get back to you. Okay, now that I have the namings right, and keep in mind the joints that are in the center, like the main joint, the spine joints, and I don't know, the spine, the neck, the head, these are just supposed to be the joint plus JNT. But the ones on the left and right that are not in the center, like the clavicle, the shoulder, etc., these have to have a left in it, because now the next step is going to be to mirror this guy to the other side. And to do that, I'm going to go to skeleton and I'm going to open up mirror joints. Okay, you have to have it on YZ behavior. And here's the tricky part: we want the tool to pick every joint in the left and put it in the right, and to not do the namings all over again, we wanted to take the left in the names and pick the word left and replace it with right. If you have something else, if you have L or R, you want to use L for left and R for right, or anything else, you can change these, but mine is left and right. So if I mirror this now, and if I look at the names, here is going to be elbow right joint, this is going to be elbow left joint, which is important here. I'm going to do the exact same for this. And now I can go ahead and mirror all the geometry. Okay, let's double click on this guy, reset. I'm gonna turn off cut geometry and combine the original and mirror. Pick the other one, press G, pick the other one. Actually, you know what, let's turn off joints for now, like that. G, 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 G for every single one. Okay, so the geometry is now fine and it's positioned just right, so I can now select all of it except for this. Select all the geometry. I'm gonna clear it up and I'm going to combine the whole geometry. You don't have to do this, but this makes it much easier when it goes to Unity or whatever the game engine there is that you guys are using, because all this information is going to go into Unity if you do, and you don't want that. You don't want all these names, you don't want anything like that. Believe me, we'll try to keep it as light as possible. So I don't know what these are. I'm gonna delete them. Okay, so now let me turn this back on. Okay, now I have a geometry, which is a character, and I have a skeleton for it, but we're far from done. Oh, forgot to mirror this one. Skeleton and mirror joints. The name is right, yeah. Okay. And the next step is going to be to add all these new joints to the definition here. If you go here, you're going to see where exactly all the joints are, and to add a joint, you can double click on this guy on the definition here and click on the joint that you want to be controlled by it. The next one is going to be the arm, forearm, the hand, okay. So now what we need to do is that if you look at it, the joints are named correctly. They are where they're supposed to be. The geometry is right. So let's name it Gabriel before we continue. So, but like I said, the joints are exactly right, but if we move one of them or rotate them, you'll see that the character is not attached to the joint hierarchy, which is the next step for our rig. And to do that, I'm going to select the joints. If you select the main joint, it's going to select the whole hierarchy. Shift select the character, and I'm going to go to skin and click on bind skin. Okay, you need to have the bind tool for joint hierarchy, and the bind method, I usually use the geodesic voxel, which is the newest one, and usually works the best for me, so you're free to use that. Everything else you can leave it, and bind skin. Okay, so the joints have changed the colors because it's kind of trying to show you the hierarchy, how they look. Alright, and now if I go ahead and rotate the chest joint, you can see that the geometry is attached to the joints, but it still has to be modified. You will need to find all the kind of the effect that the joints have on the geometry, and we need to find the best shape for it. For example, if I select this shoulder joint here and move it or rotate it, you can see that the geometry is being deformed in a very bad way. This is not something I want, so I need to do the skin painting. We need to paint the skin weight to tell the rig the exact way that we want it to control the geometry. So I'm gonna turn off the joints here because I want to see them. Now select the character, hold right click, and go to paint skin weight tool. Open this up. So these are all the joints that we have on the scene, and if you select each one of them, it's going to show you the effect that it has on the geometry. So you can go ahead and paint the weight by hand, or for example in this case this is the main joint, and I don't want the main joint to affect my legs because the character is a robot, and the legs are separate pieces than the torso. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select the thigh here, all the parts of the thigh, and I'm gonna shift drag and select everything else but the thigh, and I'm gonna go back to the skin weight paint tool. Actually, you know what, I did it wrong. I'm supposed to pick the torso because we're working on the main joint. I'm gonna shift drag to select the legs, all of the legs. Go to paint skin weight, and I'm gonna turn the value here all the way down and press flood. So now the hip joint, the main joint, have absolutely no effect on the legs, and if I rotate using that, it's not going to affect the legs at all. I'm actually not going to use the main joint to rotate anything. It's usually to move the character around, but if the hip joint has effect, if the main joint has effect on the legs, when you move the legs, they're gonna deform, and they're not gonna look exactly right. Get back to the hierarchy here, select the next one. It's the hip joint, left hip joint, which is supposed to control only the thigh because this is a robot. So like I did before, I'm gonna select all the parts of the thigh here, shift control and drag, select everything else but the thigh. Get back here, I'm gonna turn it way down and press flood. Then I'm gonna do the same and select all the parts of the thigh, turn it all the way up and press flood to avoid any kind of deformation. Now when I rotate the hip joint, it's just going to completely rotate it as a separate part. It's not going to deform it. It's not going to soften or anything like that. Go to the next one. Select all the parts that need to be attached to that one joint, which are these. Shift click and drag, go back all the way down, flood. And you need to keep in mind, you need to be really careful with this tool, because if you mess up one, you cannot undo that. You need to start exactly from the top. You need to unbind the skin and bind it again and start painting all the weight exactly from the start. It's a very delicate operation. You need to be very careful with it. The next part, select, go to the next joint, turn it down, flood, select the foot again, all the way up, flood. For this guy, you don't have to pick the whole model because it's a small joint. Here, Next one, all the way down, flood. This guy, go back, all the way up, and flood. And the next one shouldn't have, the tip one shouldn't have any kind of effect, which it doesn't actually. So let's check this out. Show the joints. If I click on the hip joint here, and if I rotate it, the leg is going to come up and down, and it's not going to be deformed, it's not going to be bent. If I click the next one and bend it, it's going to look exactly the way I want it to, like a robot. The next one, bend. Actually, you know what? This guy has to be yeah, I messed up here. This joint needs to be exactly in the middle of the cylinder shape here. This is usually not the way the characters are set up, but because this character has a foot which is shaped like this, actually it needs to have the joint here. So I'm gonna have to redo that one part, but I can do that later. But if you're usually for 99% of the character, this is exactly where you want the foot to, where the joint for the foot to be, because that's where it's supposed to bend from. But this is an exception for whatever. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do the exact same for all the arm and the head parts. Then we're gonna go and paint the torso because it's not separated. We're gonna have to paint it with the brush. So let's get it. Okay, for now I'm gonna show you how to paint the skin width by hand, which is what most of you is gonna have to do. And I'm assuming that your excuse me, I'm assuming that your character doesn't have separate legs and calves like a robot, because most of the characters don't. So if your character is a normal looking human being, or maybe a creature, or anything but a robot, you're going to have to paint all of these by hand. You're gonna have to smooth them. So you're gonna have to learn how to use these brushes and the value and opacity. For example, if I turn back my joints here, and if I rotate it slightly from here, you're gonna see this isn't actually that bad, but it can be a lot better. So I'm going to kind of check all the effect that all of these joints have on this geometry and make it in a way that's gonna show the best quality in the animation part. But like I said, this isn't actually that bad. So let's get to the main joint here, and let's smooth this a little bit. Smooth this, and you can hold down B and lift, click and drag to change the brush size here. And the reason I bent the joint is because it's a lot easier to see the effect when the joint is rotated, and you can see what the joint is actually doing and what the character is going to look like when it's bending over. Okay, but like I said, this is pretty good. And keep in mind, this can't be mirrored, so you're gonna have to do it for the both parts. Or maybe it can be mirrored, but I've never tried it. Okay, the next one. I'm trying to spread the effect So it's kind of handled by all of the joints on the spine and the main joint and the chest joint, kind of equally. And what you need to look after the most is that the surface can't be broken. If the if one of the joints have some sort of an effect that is affecting a specific part of the model in a bad way, or it's breaking it, or it's stretching it too much, that's what you need to worry about. Maybe something like that. When you're done with the bent joint, you can just zero out the rotation, but you shouldn't move it, because the kind of the translates on the joints, they don't you can't exactly freeze transformation on a joint. It's not like a geometry, so these translates need to be here, and you shouldn't move them. Absolutely not. Even if you've noticed, when we were placing all the joints in the right place, I never rotated any of them. I just moved them into place, and that's what you need to do. Okay, so let me go ahead and complete the skin paint and get back to you. Okay guys, so we're almost done. We have the skeleton, we have the weight, the placement, we have the namings right, we have the effect that they have on the geometry just the way we want them to. The only problem now is that even though we can control the body with the joints, it's not ideal, because exactly because of the history that they have. So for the animator, this is not an ideal situation. So we need to have some things that if you zero out the kind of the movement of them, the history, they need to get back to where they started, where we want them to. And we need to create a control rig. And because we are using actually humanik, we can just go ahead and select the character. For here, for mine, it's called character 1, and you can just get to the source and change it to control rig. And what this is going to do, this is going to create the IK handles and the FK controllers, everything you need to have to control your character, except for the eyes, but I'm going to show you how to do that. It's pretty simple. So the red ones are the IK controllers. For example, if I select this guy, I can move it, and it's going to move the leg, the IK handle of the leg. And the blue ones are actually FK controllers, or forward kinematic controllers. And this is much better to animate. It has pole vectors to control the bending angle of the knee and the elbows. These are pole vectors. You have the IK handles for the arms, which is going to control the arms. You have the controller for the torso to bend them forward and backwards. The controller for the main joint, just gonna move the entire character. And of course the head, where you can rotate it whichever way you want. So the only thing left to do is to create a aim constraint for the eyes to control the kind of where the character looks at. So, and of course you have the IK controllers for, actually, you know what, let me just turn off joints here. Okay, you have the controllers for the fingers to close the fingers, so you don't have to go ahead and bend each of the joints by hand. You can just go ahead and use the controller, and that's it. That's the most basic kind of the rigging you can get. Actually, it isn't basic, it's just easy because we were using the kind of the humanik. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.